It is December 1st, 2025. Y'all, we have made it to the last month of this year. I do not know where 2025 has gone, but I do know that the Trump administration is still playing the same game with Russia as they are now sending officials, I believe it's Steve Witkoff and reportedly Jared Kushner, to Moscow to meet with top Russian officials. This, of course, comes after they sat down with Ukrainian officials in Florida on Sunday, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that progress is made, but admitting that there is still a long ways to go. So, what does this mean for the state of talks? Are we going to see any kind of serious deal presented to Russia anytime soon, or is this war just going to continue on the battlefield? Well, we got into all of that and more with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Kwiatkowski, a retired U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel and professor. Karen, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Great to have you on the show again. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as U.S. and Ukrainian officials met for talks in Florida on Sunday. And we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio insisting that the 4-hour meeting was productive, but then he also admits that they still have a lot to work on. So we have yet to see the U.S. present a deal to Russia that they would actually accept that does not include a number of vague provisions like security guarantees for Ukraine. So how do you view the current back and forth on a possible deal?
Yeah, I mean, Trump thinks that he is doing a two-way arrangement. He and Putin are the masters of this war, and they're going to resolve it. But this is a three, possibly four-way situation. Certainly with the leaders of Europe, the especially the ones that really want the war. I mean, obviously there are EU members and NATO members that are not as excited about this, but the UK, France, and Germany very excited about spending more, doing more. I don't know what we could talk a long time about what their agenda has been in Ukraine, but they are a party. They're a party that Trump has ignored because they really are chihuahuas. I think that's how Pepe Escobar and others describe them. They're the European chihuahuas. So of course nobody wants a yipping chihuahua. They're not serious, right? But they are influential enough in narrative control and media, and they intend to be they tend to be influential. They tend to want to manipulate to their advantage, and that's understandable. And so when Trump tries to do something with two parties, it's really not. It's disrupted every time. Now, does Trump not know this? I don't know. I don't know if Trump doesn't really, because, and I think a lot of the whole Ukraine war was about market control and market creation. American markets, European customers, let's control that. Let's do it in energy. Let's do it in military weaponry and aid and all these things. And Trump very much wants to do that. So while he wants to control Europe, he also wants them as a customer. So he can't really, when he says to Zelensky, you don't have any cards and we're going to do this because you're losing on the battlefield. And those are true statements. And I think Vance is Vice President, can't remember his first name.
JD, yeah.
JD, yeah. Nobody knows his first name. It's JD. But he's saying that. I mean, they're losing on the battlefield. Now, we could have said this 2 or 3 years ago, but now it's becoming something that you can say. The Overton window has moved, so we can talk about how Ukraine is losing on the battlefield and is going to lose, and they're going to lose. Like every day, they're going to lose worse than they did before, and that's kind of what Trump is saying too. Zelensky knows this, but Europe, the European Chihuahuas really believe that they can get more out of this deal by postponing peace, by continuing the war and getting and getting what they wanted with this war, even though the war is physically lost. I mean, it's financially and physically and militarily lost to Ukraine. But Europe still wants what they want. And that's actually if you make a bad mistake in an investment, you really want your money back, even if your money has been, gone. Even if you buy Bitcoin at 160,000 and then it's 80,000. What are you going to do? I want that 100 I lost. Well, you don't have it and you can't get it back. That's called risk. It's called you played the game and you lost on that one. So Europe shouldn't have a voice here, but they are inserting their voice. And then you have guys like Rubio and some of the others. I wouldn't say Witkoff so much. Witkoff, I think, really only works for Trump, and he is a friend of Trump's, and this is what this is about, and I really hate to see Trump's son-in-law there, but it's the same thing. These people are connected to Trump through long trust-based relationships and money. They're oligarchs, and they're connected through that. And he can trust those people. But the other State Department folks, particularly under Rubio, who really wants approval by the Europeans, wants to push the idea that Europe can still win something from this, can still get some of their goals, NATO expansion in the future. We want to put NATO military as a protection force in Ukraine. They want these things. They don't want Ukraine to be neutral. They want Ukraine to be in the NATO orbit. So they want those things, and they've lost them. They can't get them back. Russia's not going to give them to them, but they still demand them. So anyway, and Marco Rubio, among others in our State Department, and really before that, the military guy that was the advisor that just quit. You know who I'm talking about, the older gentleman, 82-year-old general. He's not working Ukraine anymore, but for the whole past year, he was working Ukraine for Trump. And he was very much in the camp of the European viewpoint, the NATO viewpoint. Now he's gone, but he hasn't got rid of Rubio. There's a number of other people. So anyway, this is a situation where you talk to a bunch of people, everybody has a different opinion. How are you going to come together? Meanwhile, Russia sits like a Cheshire cat, really, proceeding onward very methodically, in a way that is cost effective for them. Say, oh, Russia's lost so much in money and manpower, and they're really suffering. Well, yeah, they are, but not to the extent that they're going to change what they're doing. They are actually succeeding every single day. They move to what they need, and they're going to keep doing that until there is a peace either on the ground that they dictate the 100% of the terms, a surrender of Ukraine, or a peace that takes into consideration the fundamentals of this war. And this is also something that Europe doesn't want to do, and even Trump doesn't want to do it. I'm not sure Trump even knows the fundamentals of the war, but the Europeans and the previous administration, for sure, the neocons in both administrations and all of our past administrations, they wanted this war. They wanted it for reasons that they still adhere to, reasons that they still value, and they do not want to assess that they have lost, and they have. So it's a big problem. It's a reality. Some people live in a fantasy. Some people live in reality. This is the conflict.
Yeah, and as you're watching, I mean, it's interesting to kind of see Trump trying to be in that place of playing this game of third-party mediator when the U.S. is clearly such an important party in this conflict that Russia just goes directly to the US, right? They're like, we're not going to waste our time trying to argue back and forth here with Zelensky, who is not even legally in office. Now we're just going to go to Trump because we know that if a deal is made, it is going to have to be with the US at the end of the day. And when it comes to that sort of fantasy, I mean, it's crazy to get to this point nearly 4 years in now and to have all of these European politicians that still don't get it, that do not see the reality on the battlefield, that somehow think that they're going to keeping Kiev on life support, and then somehow they're just going to bleed Russia dry when the opposite is happening as you have this war of attrition going on. How do you see the position that the West is in right now as they keep putting up these ridiculous deals, that are being reported in the media, whether it's 28 points or 24 points, and you're looking at it and going, Russia would be stupid to accept that, but the West seems to think that they still should.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is simply entertainment of the West, those who are watching Ukraine and thinking about it, because Russia hasn't been presented formally, not even yet, not even after, I guess, yesterday's meeting. Sunday's meeting, I don't think Russia has been presented with an agreed upon set of a framework, an agreed upon outline, because that's all these points is outlines. These are not, I'm so disturbed by the 20-point plan that Trump, was so happy about with Gaza. 20 points, and that's all it was. I mean, a peace plan has appendices. A peace plan has implementation, schedules, guidelines, parameters. all that entails quite a bit of work and effort and commitment, and even it is, when you create something like that, you have developed trust, right? And all Trump's peace plan is 20 points that end, it's a paragraph, 20 little short dinky paragraphs that really in some cases were very confusing. That's the Gaza one. And of course, what do we see? We see total warping of that. We see continual violations by the Israelis, which of course we could have expected to have happened, but there is no consequence there because this wasn't a peace plan. It was just a bunch of points that I'm sure the Israelis never even in their heart of hearts agreed to at all. So I think in trying to put forth a 20, was it initially 24 point plan or 28-point plan?
28, yeah.
It's all, yeah, and then fewer. Again, same thing. Very superficial, very almost casual. Not a peace plan. Nothing you could actually work with to implement a transition period from war to peace. Nothing like that. Even if Europe got their so-called ceasefire, that's just one more point. There's no fundamental on how that might be. Ceasefires are complicated to do them right. I mean, obviously, you've got to think about, okay, what about this? What about that? They're not doing any of that. This is very superficial. It's intended for public consumption. So Russia hasn't received formally anything. So basically all this is a Western circus that Russia is watching from a distance and being entertained by, I'm sure, in some ways. I'm not saying the potential for peace isn't there, but concrete steps really haven't yet been taken. But I wanted to say about the European leaders and how they are so intent on continuing this war, getting what they think they can gain, continuing to make gains. They want NATO, they want Ukraine to be open for NATO. That is a fundamental no-go, and they know that. But part of it is, if you look at the key war advocates in Europe, they're all on very shaky domestic political standing. Macron goes without saying, how many times is his parliament dissolved? He's hugely held in contempt by most of the people. I think I forget the Conservative Party, but the party of Le Pen in France is surging, as it has been for years. And this is a trend, a political trend, not just in France, but in a number of European countries, where the populist, you could call them right, but they're not really right. They're not right like right left. It's a populist, almost populist nationalist type of movement that is surging all over Europe. And it's in response to years and years of economic decline and bad policies out of their capitals. But the leaders in those European countries are very invested in those policies and they're very invested in this war. So it's almost like the game, what is this? The game where you stack the tango or so, I forget what it's called. You pull the things
for
out.
Jenga, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like that. And so if the Ukraine war, which has been sold and pursued and money has been wasted on, much as with other unpopular European policies in all these countries, if that little thing comes, if you pull out that stick and it gets thrown away, well, that was a loss. That was a mistake. That was very costly. And we did not gain a benefit, not a single benefit, except Ukrainian refugees that we're providing welfare for in our countries. That might be the only stick that has to fall. Everything else will fall. The house of cards will crumble because there are the European populations in a lot of these countries, certainly France, England, and Germany, and a few others. They're very ready to explode. They are so frustrated with their leadership that these guys are walking a high wire, and ending Ukraine, admitting their mistake there would be also almost inevitably followed by a demand for their removal, because it's not just that mistake. It's every mistake they have made for the last 15 or 20 years that are costing European quality of life. They're costing European prosperity. Their industrial base is really kind of gone through what ours did. And, think about Ohio in the 70s and 80s, right? Or Pennsylvania, that when we had very productive towns that turned into shells of themselves. I mean, this kind of thing is happening in Europe to their industries, and they're not ahead in any industry. I mean, the Asian all over the world, competition is very sharp. Their demographics aren't good. They've a lot of elderly people, few fewer and fewer younger people to make this country strong. These countries are in bad shape. Europe is in bad shape. And oftentimes when countries are in bad shape, they do seek war. And the politicians seek war because it diverts the gaze of the population outward. Oh, it's not our fault. It's this terrible enemy that we have that, oh, we have to fight them. They're awful. They're gonna invade. And this joke that Russia might invade any of these countries or has any interest or capability to do so is just insane, because the same people who will say, oh, well, they're going to keep coming, are also the same people that will point out it's been 4 years and they have a tiny sliver. They've basically retained and control a tiny eastern sliver of Ukraine, the part that we know as the Donbass. So they point out how slow and how ineffective the Russians have been, how many losses they've taken, and then in the very same breath, oh, but they're coming to get us. That tells you that you're under a political psyop by these guys, and what's really important to them is their own political survival, which of course we also see with Zelensky. But what's interesting is I think Zelensky's political survival is now, we can see an end to that. We can see that he's going to need to either leave the country or have some sort of protective situation made for him, because it's terrible what has been done, what we have done to Ukraine, what the Russians have done. It's what Zelensky and his people and the Nazis there that are influential have done. And when that bill becomes due, it's not going to be pretty. And this, again, should be something post-war Ukraine. Don't you think you need a paragraph for that in your 20-point? Yeah. And what they have is, well, Trump's going to make sure he gets half the profits. Seriously? That is not serious. That is not something that's going to work. But yeah, it's going to be it's a very difficult problem. We need peace there. But what Trump is doing, what the Europeans are doing, not serious. And I think the Russians are very correct to simply say, we're here, talk to us, show us what you have. And what have they done? We haven't shown the Russians anything, except some Ukrainian politician leaked the original 28-point plan. And that's the last we've seen of any specifics.
Yeah, it's very, very telling when you have kind of this back and forth. And I'm with you. I know that a lot of it is just kind of fodder for the media. And I'm also curious too, because I know that Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and reportedly also his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who just keeps popping up everywhere, they're headed to Moscow to meet with Russian officials. Now, President Putin has made it very clear that if a deal isn't made, then this war is going to essentially be settled on the battlefield, where Russia is advancing all along the front lines as it wears down Kiev's defensive lines, because this is, of course, a war of attrition. And it is interesting how the media will bring that up and be like, oh, well, Russia has only gained so many square kilometers. And it's like, yeah, but what have they done long term to the Ukrainian military that is now struggling to survive? So how do you see the position that Russia is in right now, and kind of their handling of this is, yes, they are open to negotiations, but they are also very much focused on the battlefield.
I think that, we've been given a gift, at least the historians have, when they look at the Ukraine war, when they look at this, because on the Russian side, contrary to the NATO side, on the Russian side, with their special military operation, which was announced in advance, not much in advance before it started, but I mean, it was announced, it was described, it was legalized in the form of a document that was approved by the Russian parliament. I can't even remember now, but it has legal binding. So let's say Putin passes away of old age or something. This is a state activity. The special military operation in the Donbass is a state supported activity. It will continue. It's not political. It's not based on Biden or a Trump or a current elected leader or a Zelensky. So very orderly, very public, very clear, very constrained. It's the ideal from a military perspective. It is exactly what military people and leaders all over the world want. That's what they want. If you're going to send me to war, Mr. Politician, please be clear with the objective that you have. Please be clear on how you intend to operate it, how you intend to fuel and fund this thing. Are you going to we Americans have no such examples of this. Okay, with the possible exception of Reagan's invasion of Grenada, which lasted like 4 days and took so tiny that it was constrained because it was so tiny. But there is no war that the United States has engaged in really since World War II, that they had any clear objective, any set parameters that were published, and none of them had a legal national impetus where no matter who the president was, this thing continued with the same purpose, right? We lost, Kennedy was trying to pull out. We get LBJ. He pulled, Vietnam is a prime example of as presidents changed, policies altered. Meanwhile, men and women got killed. And of course, we decimated a good much of Vietnam and polluted it for literally, 5 or 6 decades. They're still suffering from what we left there. So Russia's done the opposite. He's done the textbook Clausewitz kind of thing. You have politics by other means is war, but it's guided, it's constrained, it has clear objectives that don't change unless they fundamentally are required to change. And when they do so, it's an orderly change, not just a random political, I think we should do this. So he's done that. And so the historians will look at this war and they'll say, yeah, and they'll study it. They'll study what Putin had done. Now, why did he do it? Well, there was a civil war. Russians who had voted more than one time with their feet and at the polls for autonomy had been guaranteed autonomy in the Minsk agreements, right? They had been guaranteed that autonomy within Ukraine. It had passed muster. And yet all of that, the West ignored, undercut, tried to act like it didn't happen, fueled Zelensky in Kiev and to continue fighting the civil war. I mean, can you imagine? We had our civil war, and one of the big problems was for the North is the Union is that they were afraid France would help, and France did help the South, and France helped the Confederacy, and they were also very worried that England would, but they were able to control that. But France did help a little bit, and the little extent that they helped was a huge cause of panic and concern. So you're not supposed to get involved in other people's civil wars. And yet the first ones to get involved in Ukraine's civil war was the Americans and NATO, not the Russians. They were not involved. Putin was the one big public criticism that he got at the time of the SMO is that he didn't start it soon enough. That he did not do it when he should have done it. That was a vocal complaint amongst, that was reported in Russia, that Putin was too nice and he was too hesitant and he wasn't bold enough and he didn't act when he should have acted, which would have been long before 2022. But that was a civil war that was interfered with first by the West and encouraged and, aided and abetted. And then Russia came in, but not angrily. They came in an orderly manner. So it's a textbook case of how you might want a war to be done, even though it has been costly for the Russians. But yeah, Russia's going to keep going until they retain the area that the SMO talked about, which I think is the Donbass, possibly Zaporizhia, possibly Kherson. They could go and they could take all of that. Some people say, they'll go all the way to Odessa. What's not Russia? What's not more Russia than the city of Odessa, right? I mean, but it doesn't look like he's going to do that. He is not going to do that. He is going to do what he said he was going to do, and that's going to protect the dominant Russian cultural speaking, the Russians who lived in that part of Ukraine. And he's already done it in 2 cases, right? I mean, they have become members of the Russian Federation. And I think possibly if he keeps going, there'll be 2 more states that will be absorbed voluntarily via vote. I mean, you can say voluntarily, well, there's a war on. Well, you can say that, but if you look at what's really happening, the Ukrainians are just as forced, if not more so, to fight this war. I mean, how can you say they have 400,000 people with charges for desertion, with their cases pending in the Ukraine that Zelensky controls. They have been notorious for years now, not just the last 6 months, for years, picking up draftees off the street. They've lowered the enlistment age and they've raised the enlistment age to get over, 65-year-olds can now serve. That's not force. That's not making a decision under a condition of war and force. Of course it is. So, these things happen. Force is a factor, and we're at fault. The West is at fault, and I think the Americans. I mean, we have Vicki Nuland, we have John McCain, we have a whole sector of people in Washington who believe as Nuland and McCain believed. We're at fault here. So it's important that we are involved in ending this because we're a big part of it. But I think Russia is going to continue to prosecute the SMO as they had designed it. And if it needs changes on the fringes, I have no doubt that they will do so in a way that allows what their ultimate vision is, and that is a neutral Ukraine. They don't envision taking over Ukraine. I don't think they want that. Nobody wants that. They certainly not. That would be very cost ineffective for Russia to try to do that. They're capable of it, but I think it wouldn't be a cost effective thing. But what they want is a neutral Ukraine. They want, what they probably want is a Mexico or a Canada like we have, right? We have neighbors in this country that we love. I don't care what anybody says about Canada or Mexico. We love them. we love to travel there. We love to trade there, which a major part of our trade is with Canada and another major part is with Mexico. So we have friendly neighbors who we love, and both those countries are technically neutral. I mean, Canada is more, well, actually, they're both very neutral. Even though Canada is hooked into the European sphere, they very much are independent and have done good things, expressing their desires for peace around the world and being kind of independent in foreign policy. So that's a good thing. And that's all I think that Russia wants from what's left of Ukraine. And they would like that. They would like that with the rest of Europe. And one of the things, of course, we did is make sure that they couldn't trade with Europe. We blew up the Nord Stream. We have disrupted energy flows from east to west, replaced them with American energy flows. We don't want, what the Americans really want isn't peace in Ukraine. They really don't. I think Trump wants to make money out of this deal, whether that's corrupt money or a welfare state that we somehow take our cut from the welfare that flows into a peaceful Ukraine. That's what he wants. And Russia wants more substantial things. They would like to have a neutral, cooperative, friendly neighbor. We all want that. We all want that. And to make them out as evil, hateful, inhuman aggressors is really a political game to keep the European politicians in power.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see, and I know we're kind of keeping an eye on these upcoming meetings to see what is going to come out of them, if we're going to get any more dialogue about a potential deal. Before we go, though, I do want to ask you about the situation surrounding Venezuela, because the President of the United States gets on social media and declares to the entire world that, quote, all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers should consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety, as if he is, declaring a no-fly zone over this country. I'm not sure that's his decision to make. But we do, of course, have this U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, with reports that troops on the USS Gerald R. Ford are rehearsing for strikes against Venezuela. So what are you keeping an eye on there when it comes to the possibility of the U.S. starting yet another endless war?
I think the chances are good that we are going to start another war. For a number of reasons, but one of them is that as we end a war, we always have to start one. And I think this Venezuelan situation is connected to a drawing down of the Ukraine war, which I think is coming. Whether Russia makes it happen or we agree to something, it's going to happen. And where do we spend our military-industrial complex money? Where do we put that military-industrial focus? And we know. You and I probably know, and I think most of the world knows, and the people in the DEA of our country who monitor drug flows and where they come from know that the big drug threat is not from Venezuela, and really never has been. Gang threat, disruption of our our society through Venezuelan gangs. Probably on a list somewhere, but not at the top, right? And the people that study that know this. So Trump is lying when he talks about, making up things, the Gang del Sol or whatever, that totally made up. So we're lying about things again to convince the American people that he's doing something good for America. But the reality is, what the whole world knows, is that there is an opportunity, has been for some time, to exploit, extract, and benefit from the massive, massive energy reserves that Venezuela has in its territory, in its sea territory, and whatever. So that's what Trump wants. He wants to control that because he has a vision of himself as an emperor in the empire of the world, but at least the empire of our hemisphere. So, he sees himself as that this is his to do. And of course, I think very frustrated as well with the last time he tried to coup Maduro with this strange dude, one of Marco Rubio's friends, I'm sure, back in the day, who failed. And now they have the Nobel Prize winner, which is very interesting that the Nobel Prize went to this woman who, under any normal circumstances, would be considered probably a armed revolutionary, which is not normally who we give, who the Nobel Prize gets. I mean, I remember the Cambodian lady at one time got one, and she was a voice for peace. Now, she was opposed to the government, but she wasn't associated with the kinds of things that this current recipient has been. But the very fact that she received the Nobel Peace Prize, to me, looked at very engineered, because everybody's watching the Nobel Peace Prize this year because Trump insisted that he should get it, even though he knew good and well that he wasn't even president when the cutoff happened, and he's no Obama, so he's not going to get it. He wasn't going to get it this year, he knew. And yet, so he put all that focus on the Nobel Peace Prize so that when it was awarded to this unknown person who really spectacularly does not, and could never deserve a peace prize of any sort, it was almost like we were having our attention pointed there so he could do this. So I think he wants the oil. He sees an opportunity. It's interesting that he refused Maduro. Supposedly, I saw this article that Trump refused Maduro any type of amnesty or relief from the $50 million death sentence or whatever. And he refused that, even though Maduro was actually talking about that, because he doesn't want his country destroyed. But the real problem is, of course, Trump is an idiot in this regard. And threats are one thing. He has no power to declare a no-fly zone. But it's very interesting. You remember Zelensky wanted him to declare a no-fly zone. Remember? Mm-hmm. Zelensky repeatedly asked him to declare a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And Trump didn't send a tweet out on that. So this is not a real no-fly zone, but obviously Trump is so unpredictable that he's exercising every bit of power that he can extract from who he is and the position that he is in Washington. Anyway, my big concern, of course, is that it's the unintended consequences. Okay, it's one thing to say, well, we're gonna hit Caracas, we're gonna kidnap Maduro or kill him. That's how they I think they would prefer to kill him, and they'll move in their girl, and she'll be in charge, and it'll all be great. But that's unintended consequences and unexpected diversions to a plan. And these guys are terrible planners, as we've seen with the 20-point and the 28-point. They don't plan anything. They don't know how to plan. So, yeah, it's very concerning that they will extend the U.S. military in a way that causes, one of our carriers to be sunk in the Caribbean. You think that's hard to do? That is not hard to do these days. It could happen. And then, of course, you have another 9/11 style event, and we could have a full-blown destruction of Venezuela. And, these wars, I am so frustrated, particularly at the Europeans who love the environment so much, right? They're so environmentally concerned, and yet they support the physical destruction of Gaza and the genocide that goes on there. They fully support that. They arm it. They apologize for it. We do the same thing. And all these wars, what we have done, unexploded ordnance, mine clearing in Ukraine, how many years do you think, how many decades is that going to take? The Russians are probably clearing the mines in the part that they control. What about the rest of it? Are we going to do that? Is the little tiny rump state of Ukraine going to do that? No, the Europeans could care less about the environment, and I don't think Washington has ever done it. But if you look at where Venezuela is, I mean, some headwaters of the Amazon, I think, are there. It's a mountainous area. It got plenty of coastline. I mean, we could do a lot of destruction, and not just of humans, and I think our leadership is proving itself to be unworthy of the American people. I like Trump. I liked some of the things he said, but I always vote. If I vote for the peace candidate, right? Trump happened to portray himself as that last year. And that's what most Americans do. We always vote for the peace candidate, and they always lie to get elected by telling us they're for peace. I remember when George W. Bush ran, he was going to withdraw I was going to do non-intervention abroad. That was George W. Bush's campaign platform. A big part of his campaign platform. It was almost like putting America first, even before that. And no, he barely got elected, but Gore was going to do much the same thing. So we had two choices of kind of peace candidates. And Americans vote that way, and then we don't get that. We get warmongers who are every year, I think, less and less qualified to conduct war. They don't understand war. They don't understand no-fly zones. I mean, if it was that easy, just no-fly zone. Here's a tweet. It's really interesting. But no, I'm concerned about it. And Trump himself, I don't know. When you look at America, you cannot escape from the fact that we're $38 trillion in debt, and that the world is slowly but steadily abandoning the dollar as its preferred reserve currency. It's doing that in part because we fight wars everywhere that we don't win, and we have $38 trillion of debt where we add $1 trillion every quarter now. So we have unrestrained debt accumulation. That's why they're going off the dollar. And Trump thinks he's going to stop that by fighting wars. Well, all stupid politicians do think that. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a very predictable pattern.
Yeah, it really is. And, you watch, especially as we're watching this build up now and watching the Trump administration with this ridiculous pretext of claiming that, we've got to go after the illegal drug traffickers. And it's like, really, are you actually concerned about that? Because you just announced a pardon for the former president of Honduras who had smuggled hundreds of tons of cocaine into the U.S. And I'm like, okay, the hypocrisy, it's just all out in the open at this point.
Isn't that fascinating, though? Because it really makes you wonder, is Trump really have any brains in between his ears? Because, he's upset about Biden because Biden did an auto pan and didn't know what he didn't know who he was pardoning. And that's understandable. I can see that, because you should know, you should read the paperwork when you consider a pardon. So did Trump not read what this guy was guilty of? Because that's really a bad look. Here, we're going to go after these drug dealers, except for this one. He's my buddy. Okay, seriously, no, you can't do that. It's almost, if we weren't Americans living in our country, and I don't think, I'm not planning to leave, right? This is my country. We are being horrified every day by the leadership of our country, and the rest of the world, of course, is they're I don't think they're laughing. Some of them may be chuckling to themselves as they watch how American policy is done, but I think they're very concerned because they can't figure it out, because they say nobody could be that incredibly stupid and arrogant at the same time as Trump, and really a good much of his administration. You could throw Hegseth in there, right? A very arrogant guy who really, it's not clear what is going on in his brain. But he's very confident. He's the typical dummy, thinks he knows quite a bit, unaware of the fact that he knows very little. And I don't like to think of Trump like that, but Trump is kind of proving it. He's kind of causing, this is, and the other thing is, didn't we ask for an unexploded bomb back that we gave to Israel so Israel could drop on Lebanon and it didn't explode? And now we want it back. Have you heard that?
I have not heard that one. No. Oh my gosh, that doesn't surprise me.
It's an MK-29, I think, is the name of the bomb. and they're ours. We have them. I guess they have a pretty modern guidance system, but this one didn't go off. So quality control issue, right? So it didn't go off, and there's a formal request. It was reported in Israeli media. The Americans requested that this bomb be gathered by our Lebanese victims and provided back to us so that Russia and China didn't steal our technology. Anyway, that is another example of what causes the rest of the world to go, what is happening to the United States?
Yeah, I think a very big and important question right now, right, as we're talking about all of these different conflicts. And I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Karen Kwiatkowski, a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and professor, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.